Hey Internet friends, today we're talking about Jeff Bezos, a man who has surpassed Bill Gates in wealth with a net worth of $117 billion, becoming the first centibillionaire and holding the title of the richest man in modern history. In this video, we're going to talk about Jeff Bezos' childhood, his family, and his rise to power. To ultimately answer the question, who was Jeff Bezos before Amazon?
I'm just a fake silhouette, avoiding every threat. I wanna stay like a silhouette, but I can't do that. No, I can't do that.
Many folks don't know that Jeff Bezos wasn't actually born Jeff Bezos. At birth, his name was Jeffrey Jorgensen. Brought into this world by his parents, Ted Jorgensen, a unicyclist and circus performer, as well as his mother, Jacqueline Geis Jorgensen. As the story goes, Jacqueline grew tired of Ted coming home hammered every night, and eventually she divorced him. But don't worry, Jacqueline and Jeff got by since Jacqueline's father was a well-known fella by the name of Lawrence Preston Geis, a man who had worked in the U.S. Department of Agriculture prior to joining the Navy in World War II, only to return from war and dedicate his life to the federal government. In the 1950s, Lawrence worked for the Pentagon and the Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, otherwise known as DARPA, developing space technology and ballistic missile defense systems. The DARPA we know today created the basis for the modern internet. The internet which Grandpa Geis's legacy would monopolize. Eventually, Grandpa over there became the regional director of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. And after 33 years of service, he retired to his 25,000-acre ranch in Texas. Through Grandma Geis, Jeff is related to country singer George Strait. They're cousins. Ah yes, Texas, space programs, blurred lines between corporations and federal government, multiple famous family members who rose to fame post-World War II. You already know what I'm about to say, and yes, you guessed it. My Operation Paperclip senses are tingling. Are yours? Anywho, Jeff's mom remarried a Cuban immigrant named Mike Bezos. Mike adopted Jeff when he was only 4 years old, and the family moved to Houston for Mike's career as a petroleum engineer at Exxon, a direct descendant of John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company. Mike is often depicted as a success story of the American dream. He came from Cuba with nothing, and look what he became, an adopted father to the richest man in modern history. Biographies documenting Jeff's childhood point to him as a baby genius who disassembled his own crib at age 3. At an early age, Jeff was obsessed with space, and his interest was molded and developed through the Vanguard program, a gifted and talented program for children in the Texas school system. The Vanguard program identified and separated students with exceptional intelligence and abilities, and worked to hone their skills. Funnily enough, young Jeff was interviewed for a book called Turning on Bright Minds. Instead of going by Jeff Bezos, he went by the name of Tim in this interview. Tim showed the author his science project he was working on called an infinity cube, a battery-operated device with rotating mirrors that created an optical illusion of an endless tunnel. Eventually, the Bezos family moved to Miami, Florida, where one summer Jeff worked at a McDonald's flipping hamburgers. Or at least that's the famous story we were told. Because in order to endear our oppressive overlords to our hearts, the media must paint our favorite billionaires as ones with humble beginnings. After Jeff was named his high school's valedictorian, which earned him a spot at Princeton University, Jeff gave an interview to the Miami Herald in 1982, in which he expressed his dream of colonizing space, building hotels, and essentially evacuating the Earth, as to preserve it so the planet would then become a park, unsoiled by human impact. After Jeff graduated from Princeton, he reportedly turned down positions at established companies like Intel, Bell Labs, and Anderson Consulting in favor of accepting a job at Fattel, a telecommunications startup which ultimately failed, so he pivoted and got a job in the banking industry. You know, a natural trajectory after majoring in computer science and electrical engineering at Princeton. Jeff worked at Bankers Trust, which is now part of Deutsche Bank, for a couple years before moving to a New York City hedge fund called D. Shaw, which specialized in the application of computer science to the stock market. Here, Jeff became vice president by age 30. and was tasked with figuring out new business opportunities on the rapidly growing World Wide Web, which was gaining in popularity in the early 1990s. And it was also here that Jeff met Mackenzie Scott Tuttle, who was working as a research associate. They dated for 3 months, then quickly married in 1993. Very little is known about Mackenzie's past. Besides the media's depiction of her as a bookish introvert who helped her husband's career accelerate, all I could really find on her was that she was born in San Francisco. Her dad was a financial planner. She eventually attended the Hotchkiss boarding school in Connecticut, and like Jeff, later graduated from Princeton. And before marrying the richest man in modern history, she was Toni Morrison's assistant. So while working for D.E. Shaw, Jeff came up with the idea for the e-commerce store Amazon, initially to sell books online. And 1 year after he and his wife married, they hightailed it to Seattle and began business in their garage. Does this story sound familiar? I think they recycled it from Sergey Brin and Larry Page, who, by the way, have a very interesting connection to Jeff in that Jeff invested $250,000 in Google, becoming one of the first shareholders of the mega company in 1998. But that's not the only common thread here between the tech tycoons of this era like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and even Facebook. The common denominator between all of these seemingly organic technology startups from, of course, humble beginnings, is their involvement in their contracts with the United States government that eventually led to their success and financial dominance over competitors. For example, did you know that DARPA had a program that aimed to have every human voluntarily post private details of themselves online? And this program was shut down the very same day Facebook launched. Google, an alphabet company, was launched partly with the help of grants from the CIA. And Amazon would have never been the e-commerce giant it is today without the help of the United States government, granting the company special privileges, enabling Amazon to become a monopoly. The United States Postal Service is a government service designed to deliver mail to Americans. Who funds government services? Taxpayers, people like you and me. Amazon would have never succeeded had it not been granted special rates through the post office. And Bezos even landed a contract with the Postal Service so they would deliver his packages on Sundays. The post office actually loses money on every Amazon package they ship out. To really punctuate the strangeness that is Jeff Bezos before Amazon, let us conclude the first part of this video with Jeff's father, his real father, the circus performer, who is tracked down and found in his Arizona bike shop. Ted was told by the author of his son's biography that his son was an internet billionaire. And upon hearing this news, Ted was quite surprised because not only could Ted barely remember his son's name, but Ted didn't even know his son was still alive.
Gotta have a secret. I'm just a fake silhouette, avoiding every threat. I wanna stay like a silhouette, but I can't do that. No, I can't do that.
So how does Jeff Bezos' past relate to the present economic situation that the United States finds itself in right now, and what seems to be like a deliberate takedown not only of our economy, but economies around the world? In the first part of this video, we established that, like most tech tycoons of the last several decades, Jeff Bezos didn't exactly come from humble beginnings. In fact, his family was highly connected. His grandfather not only had ties to the United States space program and the Pentagon, but he directed the mass production of the US nuclear arsenal. As we dive deeper into this corporatocracy, it's clear that certain individuals have been chosen, shaped, and molded into leaders and figureheads. The organic rise to power is very rare in this day and age. And we could even make the argument that companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook really seem to be fronts for intelligence organizations, as a means of data collection and mass surveilling the public. Since these tech companies are not technically owned and operated by the government, they're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, which was established in 1967 to provide the public with the right to access records from any federal agency. In the second part of this video, I'm going to provide a rather curious timeline of events pertaining to Jeff Bezos, one of the main profiteers off of this hysteria, so that we can answer this question. Is a controlled demolition of small business happening right now? Let's begin in early 2013 when Amazon and the CIA struck a 10-year and $600 million deal for Amazon to build and host cloud computing services for the federal government, which would be used to host, among other things, unclassified and secret documents. With this money, Bezos turned around and purchased the Washington Post later that year, once owned by Federal Reserve President of the Great Depression, Eugene Myers. The impact of Bezos buying the Washington Post with money he earned through government deals cannot be understated, as this move not only bought him influence in Washington, D.C., but now he was in possession of a propaganda outlet. Later, Bezos went on to install White House Democrat swamp creature John Podesta as a contributing editor who ultimately weaponized the term fake news. In 2014, Amazon released Alexa, a smart device and virtual assistant to consumers. In 2018, reports revealed that Alexa was always on and always listening and storing personal information. Later, a judge ruled that the legal system could examine Alexa recordings for court cases. To further demonstrate that Amazon is completely aligned with intelligence agencies, in 2018, our second favorite Mossad blackmailer and Madame to the Dude Who Didn't Kill Himself attended Bezos' exclusive, all-expenses-paid campfire book retreat. But this wasn't the first time Bezos had interacted with the Little St. James gang. He'd built a relationship with Epstein back in 2011, attending billionaire dinners with him long after it was well known what Epstein got up to in his spare time. In 2019, after 25 years of marriage, Bezos and his wife divorced, which set McKinsey up with a $38 billion stake in Amazon. In hindsight, some are wondering if this divorce was more of a PR stunt, since Bezos had used the excuse of divorce to liquidate his assets and enhance his own wealth. So the thought process here is that these financial moves are normal after a divorce. But without the framework of divorce propagated by the media, the public would have been alarmed at the richest man in the world selling all of his shares. And the market would have tanked, but not in the favor of the very few. In February of 2020, Bezos did two things. He committed $10 billion to fighting climate change, even though his company literally ships out tiny single items to customers in huge cardboard boxes all day, every day. And secondly, he sold $3.4 billion of Amazon shares right before the market peaked. Perhaps one of the perks of being an insider is all that insider information, right? Well, maybe that's not the only perk, because during March, when the entire United States shut down schools, churches, and small businesses to avoid the spread of the virus, the government allowed Amazon to continue operations even after 10 factories allegedly had viral outbreaks. This has positioned Bezos to profit bigly while small businesses are going bankrupt. This decision by the government has totally harmed small business in a huge way, allowing Amazon to become an even bigger monopoly. Remember that mom and pop stores are the hallmark of American capitalism. The heart of America is Main Street in your town, not Wall Street. All of the family-owned stores that survive the Walmart era of retail will not survive this because they will be undercut by a company that the government helped rise to power. Jeff Bezos is now one of the largest landowners and one of Hollywood's biggest employers, even though he's notoriously a horrible boss who treats his employees as less than human. So beyond putting your family out of business, whatever agenda Bezos decides to champion, he can and will through his pipeline of Hollywood production. I keep repeating this, but our government created and financed this whole scenario. You know, in the days of feudalism, at least you could see who was at the end of the whip. In this video, I've told you who Jeff Bezos was before Amazon, and I've told you exactly who he is after. So what do you think, internet friends? You know, I always look forward to your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting my channel on Patreon. Bye!
Gotta have a secret.